Hey guys, welcome back for another Epic on a Budget Decklist video. Today we're going to be talking about dragons, because dragons are awesome and epic, right? And this epic dragons decklist is only 20 bucks, because this is part of our Epic on a Budget decklist, and that's what that means. Anyways, it does use TCG player prices, so when you click the link in the description below to find this decklist, you will likely see a different number there until you choose TCG player prices. Anyways, let's jump into it. Basically, we have 20 dragons, and if there's something you've noticed about dragons, it's probably A, that they're awesome and epic and wonderful and so much fun to cast, and B, that they cost a lot of mana. Okay, so we're going to look at that, how we've kind of solved that challenge here by going to the mana value. Here's the mana curve. It's a little interesting. So basically, we have obviously lands, 22 lands. Got to have lands most of the time. And we do have lightning bolts. Lightning bolts are nice. There are 1-drops. Single red. Lightning bolt deals 3 damage to any target. Classic. That's cool. But really importantly, we have in our 2 mana slot, we've got 10 artifacts that add mana. So Fire Diamond costs 2, and it happens to have elegant art, and enters tapped and adds green. It's green. What do you do with green in this deck? Adds red to your mana pool. Okay, that's very nice. We like red mana. Mind Stone costs 2, and this one does not enter tapped. However, it also doesn't give you red mana. It gives you colorless, which that's okay. It still works, and it has this backup ability of 1 and tap and sacrifice it to draw a card. That's actually really nice because with 22 lands and 10 mana rocks, eventually you will have more mana than you need. And so then you just get rid of Mind Stone, draw a card, cast a big dragon, win the game. That kind of idea, right? We also have Talisman of Conviction, costs 2 mana, adds colorless, but it can also add red or white. Don't know what you do with white. And if you do that, it deals 1 damage to you. Okay, so you'll obviously use it for colorless when you don't need the red mana. But if you do need red mana, it can do it, and that's convenient. Okay, so we have 10 of those. And the idea with that is basically you bridge the gap to 4 mana. Okay, so you notice you have nothing for 3. That's in large part because there's not actually any good dragons for 3 mana or less than 3 mana. Yeah, no, there aren't. There are a few like dragons that are meant for ramp, so technically it's a dragon, 2 mana dragon that taps to add mana to your mana pool and blah 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 blah. It's green though, which our deck is red. And splashing green causes problems. But the biggest problem with that, honestly, because there are lots of options for how to get mana, is we are very reliant, having such a high mana curve, we're very reliant on this mana these mana ramp pieces sticking around. Okay, we can't really have someone killing our creature that was supposed to give us mana, and then we're stuck waiting a turn or 2 before we can cast our big thing. We can't do that. So we have to have very consistent mana ramp. All right. And these generally provide that. Most people don't have large quantities of artifact removal in their decks. Right. If your opponent does, then, well, get a new opponent. I'm just joking. Okay, so that is really the plan. You'll notice we have 10 dragons that cost 4 mana, and really we have a couple more over here. So the idea is turn 1, mountain or land, turn 2, land and 1 of these, turn 3, another land, and now you have 4 mana. You can cast a dragon for 4 mana. All right, that is the plan, and then hopefully you can get more mana rocks and lands, and pretty soon you're casting Drakkar Seth Maw of Flames. All right. So let's get into the dragons. We have Stingerback Terror. This one's a fun one because it costs 2 red, and it's a 7/7 with flying and trample. However, it does get -1/-1 for each card in your hand, so when you do cast it on turn 3, sometimes it won't be a 7/7. It will likely not be a 7/7 actually, but it will likely be at least a 3/3 or so. So that's kind of nice. But it just gets bigger and bigger as the game goes on and you empty your hand. And that's convenient. 7/7 flying trampler can do a lot of damage pretty quickly, actually. It also has plot, and this is really nice because it's kind of our backup for these. We only have 10 of these, and 10, generally gets the job done at getting you at least one in your hand. However, sometimes you don't, and sometimes someone blows it up before you can use it. So Stingerback Terror, is a very nice backup thing because on turn 3 with your 3 lands, you can play it for its plot cost. So basically what that means is you pay 2 in red and exile it from your hand, and then you can cast it on a later turn without paying its mana cost. And you can do that all at sorcery speed. So you plot it at sorcery speed, you can cast it at sorcery speed. Okay, so just on your turn, before or after combat, basically. Okay, so that's nice because then even without one of these, you can still have a dragon on, by turn 4, and that's convenient. You can even have 2 dragons by turn 4 if you have it in the land or something. So that's nice. Thunderbreak Regent, 2 red for a 4/4 with flying, and whenever a dragon you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, Thunderbreak Regent deals 3 damage to that player. So basically, if your opponent tries to target any of your dragons, this guy lightning bolts them in the face, essentially. All right, that's nice, especially when you get multiple of these. It's really funny because then your opponent really can't do much about your dragons because they'd just die if they tried to deal with them. But then they die to your dragons anyway. So it's just kind of a lose-lose situation for your opponent and a win-win situation for you. It's pretty good. All right, and then we have Varix Bleedwing, which costs 2 red for 4/4 with flying. And that's all it is if you cast it for 4 mana, which is still pretty good. However, late game, when you do have 7 mana, you can cast it for an extra 3, and when it enters, if it was kicked, you create Karox Bladewing, a legendary 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. So if you top deck it or just, cast it a little bit later, you get 2 4/4s with flying instead of just 1, which is convenient. All right, because the idea is you want to get big dragons out as quickly as possible, because your opponent probably has already been doing stuff in the earlier game, so you need to overwhelm that, right? And especially if they have any removal, you can't just rely on 1 dragon getting the job done. You need 2, 3, 4 dragons. That generally gets the job done. Okay, which, like I said, is one reason why Stingerback Terror's plot ability is so important, so that by turn 4 you can still have 2 dragons out, even without mana ramp. All right, next up we have Sarkhan the Masterless, Planeswalker for 3 red, and it comes in with 5 Lilith counters on it. This then has 3 abilities that are all pretty nice. The first one is a static ability. So this functions all the time. And whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, each dragon you control deals 1 damage to that creature. That's crazy, especially because you are likely to have at least 1 dragon out, because he makes a dragon. And we'll get into that in a second. But you're also likely to just have other dragons out. So if you even have 2 dragons out, whenever someone tries to attack you, each of their creatures takes 2 damage. If you have 3 or 4 dragons out, this just kind of gets silly, and your opponent will often just not even be able to attack you or Sarkhan because the creatures will just die in the process. We also have 2 loyalty abilities. One is +1. Until end of turn, each planeswalker you control, which will in this deck only be this guy, becomes a 4/4 red dragon creature and gains flying. Okay, don't do that the first turn. Comes in unless you're just trying to get the loyalty because, well, it'll have 7 sickness. But, increasing its loyalty is always a good thing, especially if you're really trying to lean into the protection it provides you. Doing the +1 could actually be the right option. However, another way to lean into that is just making a dragon so that their creatures take even more damage, right? Which is what the -3 ability does. It creates a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. This elegant token over here. Okay. So then they'll just take even more damage, right? Which is, pretty nice. Though we'll put them down to 2. So you can also just leave them alone, depending, especially if your opponent probably has instant speed removal available for a creature. Don't do the +1 because then it will become a creature. There's a lot less removal for planeswalkers, so you can just leave them as a planeswalker. And honestly, never activate any of its abilities and get a ton of value just by not being able to be attacked if you already have several dragons out. Okay, so flexible card. It's really nice though because at the minimum, it's a 5 mana 4/4 with flying. Even if he gets removed immediately, just play him, make a dragon, let him die. You've got a 4/4 flying dragon, and your opponent used up resources attacking him or removing him with a spell. So that's pretty cool. All right, next up at 6 mana, we have Molten Steel Dragon, which is a very interesting little dragon. It's a 4/4 flying. However, it's got some interesting casting costs and other abilities. So this costs 4 Phyrexian Red. And the thing with Phyrexian Red is that you can either use red mana or 2 life to pay it. So you can actually play this for only 4 mana, which basically just makes this backup for all of these to play on turn 3. Okay, which is nice. However, you'd rather pay the mana since you don't really want to just be paying all your life. However, it can be very useful as just a little backup, honestly, and definitely paying 2 life and 5 mana to curve out nicely, super worth it almost every time. Okay, it also has an ability that is very similar to what is classically known as fire breathing. Classic fire breathing is pay red, and the dragon gets +1/+0 until end of turn. However, this one is Phyrexian red, which is kind of cool because then you can just dump your own life total into making this bigger and finish off your opponent one shot before they have a chance to do anything about it. I've definitely won games that way. It's fun, very satisfying. Okay. Next up, we've got Moonveil Dragon. So 3 red, and there's no getting around that cost in this deck. You're paying 6 mana. And it's a 5/5 with flying, so it's a little bit beefier. And this has another deviation from normal fire breathing. The funny thing is that in this deck, we don't actually have any with the normal ability that has been nicknamed fire breathing. We just have deviations from it, but I think they're even better. So here we've got pay a red, and each creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Not just this buddy, each creature you control. That can get a little crazy if you have even just a few dragons out. Yeah, that'll win games pretty fast. Okay, next up is Steel Hellkite. Steel Hellkite is just actually one of my favorite Magic cards ever. I've won so many games with this in so many different decks. It costs 6 mana, and it's a 5/5 with flying, and 2 abilities. One is this pay 2 mana, and Steel Hellkite gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So in this deck, since we actually are in a red deck, this is just expensive fire breathing. Okay. Oh well. However, sometimes it's still useful. The really big reason you play this, though, is this other ability. Okay, so it says Pay X mana and destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X, whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate only once each turn. So basically how that works is you attack with this, and it deals damage to your opponent. Okay. And then after that, you can pay X mana, which X can be 0, and it will destroy each non-land permanent with mana value that is exactly X. That's controlled by your opponent that you just dealt combat damage with it to. Okay. And fortunately for your opponent, you can only do that once per turn. Okay. Otherwise, this card would just be super broken. All right. One nice thing about that is that, say your opponent has stuff with hexproof or shroud or something that makes it so you can't really target it. Ward, all the ward abilities, whatnot. This does not target anything, not even your opponent. So all those things will still be dealt with. Indestructibility is just about the only thing. Either that or regeneration is really the only thing that can save stuff from this. Okay. And like I said, X can be 0, which does a very good job of taking care of most tokens. Unless the token is a copy of something with a mana value, then tokens don't really have mana values. And so the mana value is 0, right? Like our good dragon tokens over here, the mana value is 0. Right? So you can just annihilate every token, whether that's creature tokens, treasure tokens, clue tokens, whatever rather random tokens that your opponent has made, just get rid of all of them all at once for 0 mana. That's crazy. Also, you can just use it to pay 3 or 4. Get rid of a single thing that is causing a problem, and that can win you games pretty easily too. Okay, so very flexible removal. This is how we can get rid of things like enchantments or artifacts or planeswalkers. Planeswalkers can also be gotten rid of with Lightning Bolt, but yeah, that's basically how we can get rid of lots of different things. Okay, also creatures, obviously. Dracoseth, Maw of Flames, is at the very top of our curve just because he's so awesome. Costs 4 for red, 4 red, so 7 mana for a 7/7 with flying, and whenever Dracoseth attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to each of up to 2 other targets. So that means you can hit them in the face for 4 and hit 2 of their creatures for 3 each, or you can hit a creature for 4, another creature for 3, and them in the face for 3, or just hit 3 of their creatures. You just use it however makes the most sense. But if you can actually swing with Dracoseth, it generally wins you the game. I've discovered that a lot of times he just, looks so epic and game winning that he eats a bunch of removal for breakfast, never gets to attack, and all of your other dragons win because your opponent didn't remove them because they're busy removing Dracoseth. So he tends to win you the game whether he gets removed or not, honestly. Okay, and also his art is just like the most epic dragon art in Magic, in my humble opinion. Anyways, so then we've got good old mountains, 18 of them. Oh yeah, Ramanap, how are we supposed to pronounce that? Ramanap Ruins. This is a land, taps for colorless, unless you pay 1 life, so you can just pay life and it adds red to your mana pool. And it has kind of the back ability of 2 red, tap it, sacrifice it. Sacrifice a desert, very importantly, can be any desert that you control, and Ramanap Ruins deals 2 damage to each opponent. Okay. The thing is that with 22 lands and 10 mana rocks, again, you're just probably going to end up at a spot where you have more mana than you need. So Mindstone draws you a card when you sacrifice it. This deals 2 damage to each opponent when you sacrifice it or another desert using its ability. So that's pretty convenient. However, you really need your lands to come in untapped. Since you have such a high mana curve, you cannot be waiting around for your lands to untap. So that you're somewhat limited on utility lands that you are running. This thing, though, does basically, you know, what you need it to, deals damage to your opponent, and comes in untapped, and even taps for red if you need it, right? So this is a great land. All right. Other desert that we have here, this is, taps for colorless. We have so much generic mana in the costs of everything that having a few things that tap for generic mana really is not a big problem. And you can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it or another desert to exile all graveyards. We don't care about our own graveyard at all. So if we are playing against someone who does care about their graveyard, we can just exile their graveyard. And that's pretty cool. And one nice thing is, since you do have now 4 deserts, you can, say you need to exile graveyards, maybe repeatedly. As long as you have one of these out, you can sacrifice a Ramunap Ruins to this ability to exile the graveyard, and you still can do it again with the Scavenger Grounds that's left. Okay, that's the kind of cool thing with deserts, is that you can do that kind of thing. Most cards with an ability like this, make you sacrifice the card with the ability. This one's just any desert. Okay, so that's just kind of nice, honestly. We're just doing that because we can, and occasionally having graveyard hate is very useful. All right, and that's basically it, right? You've got just a bunch of dragons and ways to cast dragons and more dragons and a little bit of removal so that you stay alive to cast dragons. So let's cast some dragons. Okay, this is really a good hand. We've got 3 lands, a mana rock, 2 mana rocks actually, a dragon, and essentially another dragon. So this is really good. We'll just keep this. Turn 1, play a mountain, pass turn. Turn 2, we will play a fire diamond. Since it does enter tapped, I like to play it early when I don't have anything to do with the mana on that same turn. Okay, so then we will play a Stingerback Terror, and it's a 3/3 right now. But it's a 3/3 Flaming Trample, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so the next turn, turn 4, we'll play land. And let's see, we have 5 mana right now. We will tap all of it to play a Sarkhan the Masterless. Okay, and then we will -3 to make a dragon. So now this guy's a 4/4 flying and trample, and this guy's a 4/4 flying. And if our opponents try to attack Sarkhan or ourselves, they will each of their creatures takes 2. Okay, so if it makes sense, you can swing with this. If it doesn't, leave it up to block, whichever works. We'll just say it's turn 4. Our dragon is probably going to be able to block decently well, especially because little stuff won't be able to attack without dying. Okay, so we'll attack, deal them 4 damage. All right, next turn, we can just play Karak's Bladewing. Okay, we will bump him up to 3. So he actually is a 4/4 dragon right now, so we can't attack with him this turn. So we've got a couple options. We can just play him. That's okay. We could also just play both of our Mind Stones, and then next turn we can get 2 dragons out of him. Okay, so we'll just do that. So I'll play both of those. We'll swing a Sarkhan, and maybe we need the 5/5 flying trample blocker available, so we'll just swing with this, deal 4 damage. Okay. This turn, we have a lot of fun stuff we could do. We could -3 and then to get another dragon token, and then play Sarkhan the Masterless and -3 to get another dragon. Though I think this is what we'll actually do. We will pay 7 mana to play Karox. As I say, Varix Bladewing and get Karox Bladewing. Okay, so now we've got just a bunch of dragons. Not very many cards in hand, so this guy is now 6/6 with Flying and Trample. And we might just be able to win the game on the spot. If our opponent doesn't have any flyers, we totally can, just by making it a dragon and swinging in. And even if they, somehow surprise us, kill something, block something, next turn we're pretty much set up for success with so many dragons as well. Okay, that's basically it. That would be a lot of damage. Let's see, that would be 14 damage. Okay, because this is a 6/6, 4/4, 4/4. Okay, and that's basically it. Just play dragons, win with dragons. All right. Yeah, super fun deck. I think it's a pretty efficient way of getting even pretty big dragons out. Though, like you probably noticed, we did focus on these less expensive dragons, just so that we can be more consistent about getting dragons onto the battlefield. But it's really fun. It's a very fun deck, and hopefully you enjoy it a ton as well. Let me know how it goes when you build it, and definitely make sure to subscribe so that you see the next videos that are coming out. Have a good one.